This morning, I came across a wonderful tweet. Here's the tweet I came across. It is by David R. McIver, and it says, "Here's how to explain a board game. In order: 1. This is a game about insert theme. 2. It is a insert type of game. 3. You are trying to insert objective. 4. The game ends, insert when condition occurs. 5. Prior to that, you play by, insert how turns are structured. 6. Here are the details." I like this template because it doesn't have anything extra in it, and it starts with just what the game is, and then how you win, and then goes from there. So today I'm going to explain the game of Go, seen behind me on my teaching board, using this template. I haven't actually tried this or prepared this, but I think the template is strong. I think it speaks for itself. So I'm going to explain it to you as if you are a newcomer to the game. And my hopes are, 1, that you will understand the game of Go better than you did. And my other goal is that you will have a better way to explain games to people you're trying to explain games to. Here we are. 1. Go is a game about. For me, I would explain it as Go is a game about board control, surrounding, and territories. Really, it's about sharing space. It's about competing for space and learning how to do that well. It's a game of efficiency and logic. Let me also explain the title first. I'd say like step 0 actually in the template is, what is the game called? I could just say Go, but it is important that you know the other names of the game as well. Go is derived from I go, and Japanese, or weiqi is another word that you might hear from China, basic Chinese. And then Baduk is what you might hear from Korea. Essentially, these words are going to mean either surrounding game of surrounding, or it's going to mean like board and stone, something like that. But here we most commonly refer to it as Go. If you're going to Google the game, try Baduk, Baduk, and you might have more success, because how common the word Go is in the English language, of course. So I explained what the game is about. It's an abstract strategy game. And the objective, number 3, you are trying to win. You are trying to, by the end of the game, have more points than your opponent. You win either when your opponent resigns or when both players have passed, meaning they don't see it to their benefit to play any more moves, and then you count up the score. So again, if both players pass in a row saying, I don't want to play anymore, I don't want to play anymore, I don't see why I would, I don't see why I would place any more stones, then you count up the score, and one color will win by a margin. So your objective is to have more points than the other player. If you are clearly winning before all the moves have been played out, one opponent will usually resign, if they can understand that. So, did I lose power? Hold on, give me a second. Sorry. Okay. That was 4. That was when the game ends. So when both players pass, or when one player resigns. Then we get to the good stuff. Prior to winning, you play by, and here's how turns are structured. Let me start with the clear board. This is a game for 2 players. and the players take turns. One player is black, one player is white. Black always goes first, and you place a stone anywhere on the board, that is, any intersection of the board. Edges are fine, corners are fine, and you take turns. You're not really going to want to pass until you get very, very far towards the end of the game. And this continues. Once a stone is placed, it does not move. It doesn't do this. Stones are simply added to the board one at a time, and so on. They stay on the board as long as they have intersections around them. Currently, this stone in the middle has 1, 2, 3, 4 intersections around it called liberties, so it gets to stay on the board. If it loses those liberties, now it has 3, now it has 2, now it has 1, now it has 0. It comes off the board as a prisoner. So white would keep that stone and get to count the stone as 1 point at the end of the game. So, one way of making points. For that reason, it is generally important to keep your stones protected by making sure they have room to breathe, they have liberties. By adding a stone to this one, I have added to the liberties of that group. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I have 8 liberties. I have 10 liberties, and so on. So in this way, by extending your stones, you can defend against getting surrounded. At this point, white would have to play very many stones in order to take these off the board. 1 liberty left. Last liberty is taken. And these would come off the board as prisoners. Again, worth a point at the end of the game. Now, there is space in between these stones, and this is important to see because this is the other way that you make points in the game. Again, you're trying to have more points than your opponent. Right now, these stones are completely encircling these 4 intersections of the board. Every single intersection of the board is worth a point. It's a potential point to be taken. So 19 by 19, don't actually remember the math on that, but there are that many potential points to be taken. So here 4 have been taken. Depending on the rule set, the stones might be worth points, but in general, it doesn't make that much of a difference. The easiest way to think about it is to see what they are surrounding. So here, these stones are taking 4 points. You can use the edges to surround points as well. Here, 6 points are being surrounded. Let me see. Here, 8 points are being surrounded. And so on. Now, if either of these was a black stone, they are not solid points yet. It needs to be surrounded by 1 color. But knowing this information, knowing that you can capture points, and knowing that your stones can get captured for points, both players take turns trying to find the most high value moves, trying to use their stones more efficiently than the other player. Oftentimes making sacrifices, depending on play style, sometimes claiming huge parts of the board while the opponent is trying to invade that territory. Other times playing a little more with a little bit more detail and fighting over very specific parts of the board while also threatening to capture other stones. Some games might end up in huge fights. But all of that we've gotten from very simple rules. Get more points than your opponent. There's 2 ways to make points. Your stone can only stay on the board if it has liberties left. From that you can play an entire game. There is one more, I'd say 2 more important rules. As the game develops, you cannot self-capture. If black has a formation such as this, and it's white's turn, if white played here, it would have no liberties. So this is a suicide. This is a self-capture. You can't do that. This is an illegal move. If one space is open, you can still play there. That's fine. Even if on the next move you would get taken, still entirely legal to play this way. Another example of a move you couldn't play is this move right here. It self-captures both of these stones, so you cannot play that. The other move that is important, it is a more rare that it comes up as necessary, but it's called the Ko rule. Excuse me, and it just means the board cannot revert to an earlier state. Every move, every position will be different. So let's say black had this formation like this, and white played right here. This stone now only has 1 intersection available, so it's in Atari, kind of like check in chess, but not as dire. This stone is being threatened to be captured. So if black doesn't protect this stone and plays it somewhere else, white would capture this stone that comes off the board. Now you'll notice though that this stone is now in Atari. It can't, or it could be taken right now, except the Ko rule states that the board cannot go back to a way that it was before. Right now, if black immediately took, we were just there. So instead, this must remain as it is, and another move must be played. Black plays somewhere else, and then white can go ahead and fill in, or if white responds to that move, now black can come back and take this. This is also a good time to explain that though this looks like a suicide, it's not because it captures a stone. An important detail, and can be confusing at the beginning, but it's not a suicide if it captures a stone and ends up still having a liberty. Okay, so let's look at our template really quick and see how we've been doing. One, we got, this is a game about, I explained it most simply as sharing space or competing for space. A game about territory and board control. 2, it is an abstract strategy game. 3, you are trying to win more points than your opponent. You are trying to win by scoring more points than your opponent. 4, the game ends when one player resigns or both players pass. 5, prior to that you play by, and we learned that you play by taking turns placing stones on the board. And then I gave you details about the actual physics of the game, if you will, where stones can be placed, where they can't be placed, and the dangers that the stones are in, the conditions required for them to stay on the board so they can remain useful to a player. I think that was, I personally, that helped me organize my thoughts about Go. I think in the times that I've explained it, I've stayed pretty close to that intuitively, but it's nice to have a practice. I would invite you whenever you are explaining any game to a newcomer next game night that you have with your friends to practice those steps. I will link to the tweet at the bottom of this video so that you can see it for yourself. You could write down those rules and then put them into practice. For the end of this game, I am going to play out not an entire game of Go, but the first 50 moves of a hypothetical game between two intermediate players. I'll explain a little bit about what's going on so you get the gist of why players would play that way. And then I'm going to leave it up to you to do any further exploring about the game. If you have any other questions or you feel that I didn't explain anything sufficiently, please let me know. Send me a message or comment on this video, and I will see you in conversation there. So, an example game. Black always goes first. Let's clear the board entirely. Black always goes first. I will number these moves. Move 1. Move 2. Move 3. Move 4. Move 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. 19. 'It's White's turn. Sorry, I forgot whose turn it was. 20. 21. 22. 23. 24. 25. 26. 27. 28. 29. 30. 31. 32. 33. 34. 35. 36. 37. 38. 39. 40. 41. 42. 43. 44. 45. 46. 47. 48, 49, 50. Do a few more. 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56. I will stop there and explain a little bit about what is going on this board, how to interpret it. This is a full-size board. This is 19 by 19. I want to note that you can play this game on different sizes, commonly 9 by 9 and 13 by 13, which are a little bit less complicated, though still very complicated. Think about chess for a moment, and that chess is an 8 by 8 board, and with a total of 32 pieces on it, the complexity that exists in that game. Then think about 9 by 9 and then 19 by 19 with the amounts of pieces that will eventually be played on that board, and you can see it gets very complex. For that reason, it's important sometimes to have people comment on games and explain a little bit of the rationale behind certain moves. You might have noticed in this game that the players started in the corners, and that is just due to efficiency. You can cooperate with the edges, as I demonstrated earlier, to create territory. So if you're using the edges as a wall, those are stones you're not having to play for your wall. Thus, the corners are common starting places. The game moves to the edges and then kind of spills out into the center in a typical game. Obviously, it does not have to go that way, but in common play, that is what you'll see. So right now, you can see some stones. You can see stones working together to create formations and structures, which will hopefully come through for the players and create points and create solid points by the end of the game. Even if something looks like it will belong to a certain player in the late early game or early mid game, by the end there are a lot of surprising exchanges that can happen. But as it stands right now, white looks to be claiming a lot of the left side. Black looks to be claiming a lot of the top and right side. White also has a corner that they are building over here. They have influence towards the center of the board and some points on the side. A fight has broken out here, but black has points in the corner that will be solidified eventually, and a small fight has broken out over here. One thing I want to point out is that diagonals are not actual connections. So here, this group is not connected to this group, and this group is not connected to this group. There are four groups surrounding this point of division, I will say. So this group is not entirely safe, and this group is not entirely safe. They are at risk of being captured as the game goes on. A way that you might see that fight continue is something aggressive like this. I will be blunt about it. Not going to be fancy. This stone is an Atari. Now this stone is an Atari. Black captures and has the first prisoner of the game, and white will do something like this Hello again. It's tomorrow. Not for you, but for me making this video. It's tomorrow. My battery went out on my camera, so I was in the middle of showing you something here, and then thought that it was still rolling, that the footage was still rolling. So, um, yeah, it was. Yep, I feel silly about it, but I'm just gonna. So this is what I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. This is what ended up happening as I continued to play out this hypothetical game, um, and I'm just gonna summarize that really quick and leave you with a couple finishing thoughts for the end of this video. Um, Previously, I was talking about this group getting attacked, this fight that was happening. Basically, White ended up making a living shape, just which means Black can't play in either of these spots. They're called eyes, and because Black can't play in either one, due to the suicide rule, White is alive. However, in that fight, Black got all these moves up top, and then later, as the game went on, there was like a fight here that happened. Some stones got captured. Um, both players in this scenario were able to use some of the stones they already had in order to make more solid walls. You see this rectangle forming. You see this rectangular shape forming here as well. What happened here was a chase. Black's group that was right here got pressured out this way. It did make it out, but in the meantime, White got a lot of stones out here that it can use to try to reduce this area of the board. The main takeaway to wrap this up is that every part of the board, while at some point they seem separate, inevitably come together and influence each other. What happens on one corner of the board could determine the entire outcome of a fight that starts in the other corner of the board. And I think that's what is amazing about Go and what keeps me coming back to it. There's an unpredictability that comes with the sheer scope of the playing field. It's really, really, really hard to predict what is going to happen and to predict how your moves now are going to actually affect the rest of the game, especially the farther on you get. So this board is not actually complete. The players still have plenty more moves to make, but it's getting closer to the end game. This is like later mid game at this point. But there's still many moves to be made. By the end of it, all the walls here will look more like this, where the stones are solid and you can see there's no breaking points, there's no cutting points for the opponent to attack. And then everything will be easier to count. I can't remember if at this point in the video I had already counted anything, but here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 intersections, empty intersections that Black is controlling with their stones. So that is how you would count that. That is also how you would count every other section in the board. When the players agree that everything has been resolved, that they don't have any more moves that they would like to play, they will pass. The other player will pass, and then they'll count the board officially. So I want to go back. I want to go back to the original tweet that inspired this whole video and just check up on the template that we had for review. So 1, this is a game about sharing space, competing for space, territory, and board control. It is an abstract strategy game. You are trying to win, and the way you win is by securing more points than the other player. The game ends when either an opponent resigns or both players pass and the score is officially counted. Prior to that, you play by taking turns placing stones on the board. Black goes first, white goes second, and you can play on any intersection. The board remains on the stone remains on the board as long as it has any liberties surrounding it. It comes off the board if all of its liberties get taken. The details, I just explained to you all of them. If you stuck around for the hypothetical gameplay, you probably understand a little bit better why the details matter and how they actually play out. But you should have the gist. Yeah. So again, I was really glad to see the tweet. I encourage you to take these steps, write them down. That's the first thing I actually did, was write them down in my journal, so that I would remember them better. And then I came here and practiced it. So I'm going to encourage you, write down the steps. If you're someone who plays games and finds yourself teaching games ever or learning games, practice it as soon as you can. So the next game night you have, the next time you're learning something new or teaching somebody else how to play a game that you like, try these steps and see if you guys are able to move into actually playing the game quicker and with more clarity. I think you'll be glad to have this framework for thinking about it. Thanks for listening and happy going.